Hi everyone, welcome back to Aspergers from the Inside. Today we have a special rapid-fire Q&A session, two autistic adults answering questions about autism and late diagnosis. So let me start off by introducing our special guest.
Hi, I'm Sam and I run the YouTube channel Samdy Sam. I was diagnosed with autism in 2019 at the age of 33 and I now make educational and entertaining videos about neurodiversity and autism.
So Sam and I are going to be answering a couple of commonly asked questions. For example, have you always known that you were different?
I think I always had a vague idea that I was different from other people, but it really became apparent around the age of 11 or 12 when I hit puberty. Suddenly things seem to change a lot. The social world of girls changes quite significantly at that age, and I didn't really seem to keep up with my peers.
For me, the answer is unambiguously yes. Even from my earliest memory being 3 years old in kindergarten, trying to figure out how to make friends with the other kids. I might as well have been trying to make friends with a flock of seagulls at the beach. It felt like if I got too close, they would run away, and I had no idea why.
Did you have a light bulb moment?
So I thought I knew what Asperger's was for a while, but really I only had stereotypes like Sheldon from the Big Bang Theory to compare to. So I could relate to a lot of that. But I was an engineer, right? So a lot of my colleagues had a lot of similar traits. So I really didn't think much of it. But later on, I read a book called Look Me in the Eye by John Elder Robinson. And I actually had to put the book down halfway through because I related so much to what he was saying. And I literally called up my local Asperger's support group network and went and attended a meeting the next day. So yes, I definitely had a light bulb moment.
In 2017, I think, YouTube kept pestering me with this recommended video about autism in girls. And, it sort of chased me down with it. And eventually I gave up and clicked on it. And I was a bit like, but this is just describing me. So from then on, I kind of went down this big sort of rabbit hole of research. What labels did you have growing up?
So for me, the most significant label I had growing up was gifted. And to be fair, that explained a lot at the time. It explained why I was so bored at school. It explained why I was having so much trouble connecting with other kids my own age. But it didn't explain everything. It made it sound like it was my intelligence that was alienating me, but there was a lot more to the story that label really just didn't capture.
I think the labels that I had were not all negative. I was called intelligent, shy, sensitive, weird, sometimes hysterical.
Why was it important for you to seek a diagnosis?
It was important for me to seek a diagnosis because I wanted to be sure that I hadn't convinced myself that I was autistic, that my experience did indeed fit in with what professionals viewed as autism.
So for me, I felt like I'd spent my whole life trying to explain myself to others and not being believed. They would say things like, no, that can't possibly be true, you must be exaggerating. And it was very invalidating for my experience. So to finally have a thing that I could point to and say, see, I'm not crazy, this is actually a real thing, my experience is valid, was an incredibly important thing for me.
What did the diagnosis process look like for you?
So in Australia, the first step is to get a referral from a GP, and I was really lucky to get a recommendation to a psychologist with a lot of experience diagnosing adults. In that first appointment, she told me that in her professional experience, it was obvious that I was on the spectrum, but I have what's called a preliminary diagnosis, which means that in her professional opinion, if we went through the process, the answer would be yes. And that was good enough for me.
My diagnosis process was pretty straightforward. I went to my GP, I got a referral, and I had to wait about 4 months, which is not bad at all. And then I had 3 sessions for my diagnosis, which lasted 2 hours each. So that was pretty intense. And they involved interviews about my childhood, about my current life, and quite a lot of questionnaires as well. What's something you've done but never realized it was an autistic thing?
So I've always got a drum beat in my head and I tap on things when I'm thinking, so that drives people crazy if I'm not careful. I knew that I liked to work quite intensely and then crash at the end, but now I recognize that as a type of burnout and my behavior in that burnt out state as quite extreme by neurotypical standards. I go completely non-verbal sometimes when I'm too tired and things like that, and I just didn't realize how atypical that was until I started meeting others on the spectrum.
I guess all the stimming I've done throughout my life is obviously an autistic thing, but because I never realized that's what it was, I always thought that it was bad habits, I called them. So I always rub and tap my fingers and fidget with my fingers as well, and picking off the skin, that's not such a good one, biting the inside of my cheeks. But really the entire way my brain thinks is an autistic thing, and something that I also never realized.
How did it feel to finally find the autistic community?
It was very validating, and it also gave me hope for the future, hope that I can make connections that I've been searching for, and hope that, well, the realization that there's actually more of us out here than people think. There's a lot of autistic adults out there.
When you've spent your whole life thinking that you're the only one and no one else could possibly ever understand, to finally meet people who can and do is absolutely life-changing. To this day, my number one piece of advice is go out and meet other people on the spectrum. It will make you feel more normal than you've ever felt in your whole life. How do you explain autism to others?
Mainly just very patiently and with the expectation that they have very outdated knowledge of autism. So it's usually a nice surprise when somebody understands, but I go in not expecting them to. I go in having to reconstruct autism from the ground up every time I explain it, which is exhausting, but it's emotional labor that I'm willing to do right now.
So actually these days I just don't. I used to describe it as a way my brain was wired. I used to say I have a really structured, logical brain that is really good at some things and not so good at other things. But yeah, these days I don't try and explain it all. It's just too much trouble, and people tend to get caught up in stereotypes and just not understand anyway. So instead, I tell people what I need and I tell people how I work best, and I don't mention autism at all.
What is something you wish the world would understand about autistic people? That we have so much more going on the inside than it might seem on the outside, and our inner world is extremely rich, and we may not communicate as you might expect, but it really is worth getting to know us better, because you really can't judge us from having met us briefly. I think autistic people take a long time to open up and a long time to get to know, but we're worth it.
I would like the world to know that you can understand us. We're not so different, we're still human, we have the same needs and emotions and desires as everybody else. We just express them in different ways. I want to connect, just not on your terms, not if I have to hide my true self to do it. Meet me halfway and we can have a real relationship. As I always say, don't force me to fit in, include me while I'm different. Okay, so thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave us a comment telling us what you wish the world knew about autism, and remember to hit subscribe if you'd like to see more of this content. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you so much for having me on your channel, Paul, and I hope that some of your viewers might like to come over and check out my channel, Samdy Sam, for another autistic adult's view on autism and neurodiversity.